talking money.
Give us gold. Give us gold. Give us gold.
Yeah.
Give us something. Okay, Forest School Elementary, 4th graders. You're on this side right here. Okay, this is the splash zone right here, so JJ, watch yourself.
And there's a blacksmith over there. Blacksmith like in Minecraft, but there's flames in. Dude, check it out.
Hey, dude, me and Shasta. On this side, over here, over here. Okay. Come in.
Hey, you just kind of front of me. I can't see. You could get wet. Excuse me.
Let's go that way.
That way.
You have a boat? Go back that way. The boat's gonna hit you in the face.
Okay, you're on this side of me. Okay, so look at here. We're talking about seasons, okay? So this belt, Jenna, Corey, look at the belt. That belt, we're going to snap. Boom. This is right in the snapping area right here. You don't want to be that. Go that way. All of you. You don't want to be close to the snapping area. Okay, and everybody is listening. Thank you. Okay, Nathan, Alicia, that side. You're not in the snapping zone. Go. Over. Okay, stay quiet on set. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Welcome to the Mariposa Museum and History Center. My name is Ron. This is John. We're going to be operating the stamp mill for you. But before we do, I want to talk to you a little bit about the gold rush and about what it took to use this kind of machine. Now, everybody knows in the early days of the gold rush, 1848, when they discovered gold, it was easy to find. It was laying in the rivers and the creeks. The Native Americans really didn't have a use for it. It was too soft a metal to make any tools out of, so they just used it for adornment, for jewelry. When the Spanish came here, they found the Indians wearing this gold, and they knew that there was gold in California, and so they set out to look for it. But when the Spanish came through here, the Spanish explorers, they didn't find any gold in the Mariposa area and the Motherlode area, inland California. It wasn't until 1848 that they discovered gold in the American River. And at that time, you could just take a frying pan or a wash basin or a bowl and just scoop up some gravel and pan for gold. The gold was just laying there. Now, how did the gold get there? Well, gold is formed, of course, in quartz. It takes millions and millions of years for this quartz to erode down and turn into sand. When it turns into sand, the gold is there, and you can just take it out. Now, the thing about gold is it's 18 times heavier than any of the other sand that's in the rivers and the creeks. So gold sinks to the bottom of the sand. So if you were to scoop up some of this river gravel and it had gold in it, you put water in it, shake it around, it's going to go down to the bottom of the pan because it's 18 times heavier. And then all you do is you just separate off the top of the sand and the gold's at the bottom. The problem is, at the beginning of the gold rush, there was a lot of this stuff around, a lot of this gold in the rivers and the creeks, and more people started coming in. By 1849, the famous 49ers were here. That's when there was just an influx of people into California looking for this gold. You know, they were told that there was so much gold in California that if you had a beard and you were to swim across a lake or a river in California, you'd come back with so much gold in your beard that you could pan it out. And they said when you were done gold panning, or you had enough gold to build a house, build a cabin, and you called for your family and your wife hung curtains on the windows of the cabin, when they got dirty, you didn't just wash your curtains, you panned your curtains out. They thought that there was gold literally wafting in the air. There was all these stories about how much gold was in California. But by the time people started coming into California and coming to the gold fields up here, they saw so many people lining the rivers and the creeks. They thought, boy, there must be plenty of gold around here, but they were all working for gold, and it was all starting to disappear. And pretty soon that gold was getting real hard to find. And what would you do? You go home with either nothing to show for it, or you go to work for somebody that had one of these machines. Now these were built by people that knew about gold rushes. The California gold rush wasn't the only gold rush around. There was a gold rush before the California gold rush on the east coast of the United States in the 1830s. And they learned that that gold in the rivers and the creeks would disappear. And the way to make money gold mining is to go hard rock mining. And that means you dig down in the ground, you find the quartz that's still buried, and you crush it up. And that's what these machines do. In a few minutes, it turns this into what took millions of years for Mother Nature to do. So the idea is to turn quartz into this mud, this, in just a few seconds actually. So what they did is they would go down in the ground and they would dig out pieces of ore. They would actually use dynamite to blast pieces out of the walls of the formation of quartz. They bring it up to the surface here. They would load it up in the top of this stamp mill. It would be funneled down through chutes into this box here. This box is the mortar box, the crushing box. These stamps are 1,000 pounds. This is a 5,000 pound stamp mill. The idea is to lift these 1,000-pound stamps and drop them on this ore, and it just pulverizes it into the mud. Now, these things weren't anything new. In the 1830s, they had stamp mills on the East Coast. They had stamp mills in the 1500s in Germany. But all the stamp mills in Germany were all made out of wood. These were trees that were put on end, and they lift the trees up and they drop them. And these were used to crush coal in Germany. So these type of machines had been around for a long time. But when they brought them to the east coast of California for the first gold rush, they worked fine. When they brought these to California, they didn't work so good because the ore here was very hard. And the trees that they were using for stamps were breaking. So the people that brought these stamp mills, the idea of the stamp mill here, went back to San Francisco, and they started making them not out of trees, they started making them out of metal. And these were made in San Francisco. They were brought up through the inland waterways, they were taken to Stockton, they were put on wagons, and brought up here to the gold fields and set up. These are heavy pieces of machinery. They were real hard to get up here. They were expensive to set up. The only person that could afford a stamp mill was a big business. You couldn't make a living down at the rivers and the creeks around Mariposa. You went to work for somebody that had these stamp mills. It was like a Walmart coming to town. It was big business. And because it was big business, there was a lot of people that invested money in these things, and they had to get their money back. So these stamp mills were running. They were all over Mariposa. This is a 5-stamp mill. They had 10 stamp mills, 20, 40, 60, even 100 stamp mills up and down the Motherlode area. So these were very noisy. They were so noisy you could hear the stamp mills 40 miles away. If you were in Planada, you could hear the stamp mills of Mariposa. People were told, if you're looking for the gold fields, just listen, you'll hear it. And there were stamp mills echoing up and down the foothills here all night long. Okay, so how do you get this thing moving? The first stamp mills that came up to Mariposa were run by water power. So this big belt, this big wheel had to move. The belt would go down to a water wheel that was in a river or a stream. You had to have a good flow of water to get these things going. The problem was, in the summer, not much water, stamp mills would shut down. Well, then they got the idea, geez, there's these new things called steam engines. We're going to start using steam engines. There was a lot of steam engines around in the early gold rush because a lot of people came into San Francisco Bay and they abandoned their ships. A lot of the ships had steam engines on them. So they pulled the steam engines off of the ships, they brought them up here to Mariposa, and they hooked them to the stamp mill. They worked great because you could operate them day and night, night and day. The investors, the people that own these stamp mills were happy because they were making their money back. The problem was in about 20 years, all the hills up here didn't have any more trees because you're always cutting trees down to cut wood to start a fire under the steam boiler to make the steam engine work. So after a while, the people that own these stamp mills had to spend more money bringing wood in than the gold that they got out of the mill. Eventually they went to diesel engine power and to electric power. But the thing was, these took a lot of energy, a lot of trouble to get going, to keep them running. Now, how did they get the gold out? So you turn this into this. The gold is in there. You could pan it out and separate it out that way. But even in the 1800s, they used a little bit of chemistry. These plates that I'm standing on here were made out of copper. And what they did is they took mercury. How many of you guys know what mercury is? Not the planet, mercury. No, mercury is a metal that's liquid at room temperature. It's a liquid metal. Poisonous, it's toxic. They didn't know that back then, or they didn't care about that, but they would take mercury and they would paint it on these copper plates. Mercury likes to stick to other metals. So they painted on, this mud would wash over these plates, and as it did, the mercury would cling onto the gold, and the rest of the rock would wash away into the dump. After a while, what's left on here is a putty. And they would scrape the putty up into a big ball, and it had mercury in it, and it had gold in it. At the end of the day, they would take that ball that had the gold in it and put it into a thing called a retort. This is a little tiny retort. Think about this thing being 3 feet wide, a big giant bowl. Same with this. They would put all the balls into the retort, they clamp a lid on it. So that has the mercury and the gold in it. They heat it up. They put a fire under this end. At a certain point, the mercury turns into a gas. Goes down through this tube into a bucket of water, turns back into mercury. They paint it right back on the plate. So what's left after the mercury comes out?
Gold.
A little puddle of gold in here. They would pour it off into molds, into bricks, and they'd have Wells Fargo come up to the mine, into the mill, and pick those bricks up. They would put them in strong boxes so people couldn't steal them, and they take them down to San Francisco to the mint, and they make them into coins. So that's how the gold got from the ground to the mill to the mint in San Francisco and got made into money. Now, the problem was some days they would be milling this material all day, and they wouldn't make a lot of gold wouldn't come out of it. And those were called hungry quartz days, because if the owner of this mill didn't make money that day, all the guys who were working around the mill didn't get paid that day. And they literally went home hungry, because you only made a wage, you made a wage each day, and if you didn't take home any money, then you didn't have anything to eat. You didn't take your daily bath, and you didn't want a bunch of hungry quartz days. Now, I told you about these things being loud. What they would do with these things, if you were working around a mill like this, you could go deaf. You could lose your hearing in a few days. And these fellas had to stick cotton balls or wool. They'd dip it in olive oil and they'd shove it in their ear. It's pretty gross. And what's even more gross is they would have a bucket of beeswax. They would have it all heated up all the time. And they would take a glob of beeswax and stick that wax on their ear too. So that was, instead of earplugs, that was what they used to protect their ears. How did they take that one? Yeah. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to run this machine for you, and then we'll take any questions.
Step back. Is it going to be I want to be turnable. No,